Former UMass Lowell distance runner Nate Jenkins will represent the United States in August in Berlin at the Track and Field World Championships. The marathon has become Jenkins' specialty, and we had a chance to talk with him about it. So now, that conversation with runner Nate Jenkins. Just being named to the team, what's that mean to you?
I think for me, it's a tremendous amount of validation. I think sort of an end in itself. I think so much of sports and competition in life is just always sort of working towards the next thing, and not being a high school superstar, not being a college superstar, even at Division II level. You know, I was fourth or fifth guy on the team most of the time I was there. I think that to get to wear the USA uniform and represent your country is just sort of an end and a real prize in and of itself. At
some point, wearing that uniform, did that become a goal?
There are always goals on different levels. From the time I was a little kid growing up in New England, I watched the Boston Marathon on TV every week and just said, I want to win the Boston Marathon. Every New England kid who runs thinks about that. But as you get more into the sport, time goals start to evolve, and there are other things like, oh, I'd like to do this or I'd like to do that. And I think for me, one of the really big goals was to represent the United States in international competition.
And when the collegiate career comes, you reach a point where you've got to make a decision whether you're going to continue to run or do something else. What was that process like for you?
I finished out my eligibility in a fifth year, but I was in grad school. So I was kind of like, well, I'll just, keep running. I'd finally kind of, with Gary coming on board, started to really get healthy after having a lot of injury problems, and I was improving kind of quickly, and I felt like I had unfinished business. And running's not like basketball or hockey where you need to be on a team. If it had been, I'd have been done. I just sort of, I'll keep going. And that year went well. I mean, it went really well. I didn't get all my goals, but I really ran well. And it was one of those things where I had a couple of part-time jobs, and it was like, I could go and get a real job and, really focus on my career. But the Olympic trials qualifying for the marathon was now suddenly sort of within reach. And it was like, well, that would be fine. I'm young. I got all this time. What the heck? Why don't I just throw that out there as a goal? It'll give me something to do, and I'll just keep working these little part-time jobs on the side, and I'll get by, and it'll be something fun, something I can tell my kids about down the road. And then instead, I ended up running kind of much faster than I expected. And then it sort of snowballed into, this is what you're doing.
Why'd your times improve at that point in your career?
It's funny where I've, largely done the bulk of my own training stuff and really experimented a lot. I think it was a combination of things. Getting away from the 3 competitive seasons really helped me. I think some people really thrive in that, but for me, my body would tend to break down with a lot of quicker work and a lot of extra racing. And I've even found I can handle the racing if I'm not always as sharp, not always doing as many of the quicker workouts. I think the biggest thing was staying healthy. Once I did stay healthy, I shifted to more of the Italian school of marathoning versus sort of the traditional American running system. It wasn't a direct thing. I kind of tried a few different things first, and it just really worked for me.
What's the Italian school of marathoning as opposed to the American?
Everybody sort of comes from the same guy, which is this guy Arthur Lydiard in New Zealand, sort of invented a different way of training for all distance racing in the late 50s, and it just reinvented the sport over the next decade. And so everybody sort of starts with that, which is basically the idea of doing a lot of easy running, and then you do workouts to get better. The biggest difference between, I think, the Italian and the American school is that we tend to, if you're preparing for a marathon in America, you do the same mileage. Maybe you run 100 to 150 miles a week or something, but you tend to do workouts that are geared towards running a 10K race, like faster, quicker, shorter intervals, and a Sunday long run. The Italian school, you may not have like a specific Sunday long run, but you tend to do a lot of sort of what I call aerobic quality. So instead of doing, say, mile repeats in 4 minutes and 30 seconds, you're more likely to go out and try to do a 10-mile run in 50 minutes. So it's a little bit slower, but you don't take the breaks, and you sort of do more stuff like that. Instead of working so much on the anaerobic and really the power systems, focuses a little bit more on sort of being relaxed at pace and teaching the body to run quickly for a long time, sort of from a different direction.
At the university, you weren't running the longest distances. What was it about the marathon that became your goal?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember in high school actually having an argument with my indoor track coach, and I was feeling I wasn't performing at the level I wanted to perform at, and it was my last year, and I was just finally like the top kid on my high school team, but I just wasn't really running well, and he was sick of me basically complaining. He basically said, stop whining, you're going to run a very fast marathon someday. At the time, it made sense to me. I always did better the longer the race, but in high school, longest race is 2 miles. And then I got to college, and I was naturally kind of better at the longer stuff, but I had so many injury problems that I just couldn't really get fit enough to really do a good 10K. So I ended up more in that 5K range just because I didn't stay healthy long enough to really take a shot at the longer stuff. And it was sort of, that was always our focus. That was always the goal. But my performances weren't catching up because I wasn't staying healthy long enough. Right towards the end, I started to run better in the longer stuff. And I had a couple of, runs during cross country my last year. And then later on, just after I left school, that were kind of saying, okay, moving towards the longer stuff's going to be better.
To be a good marathoner, how much of that race and being successful is about being prepared mentally?
I think it is, and I think it's funny because it takes a different mental set than a lot of the shorter stuff. I like to think of myself as being a pretty tough guy, and, being able to handle some pain. But I think that there's a mentality for 800-meter racing, mile racing, that is different from necessarily the mentality that really succeeds in like 5,000, 10,000 racing. And in the same way, there's a huge shift for the marathon. In the shorter events, you deal with a lot of pain. You're really running through some serious pain, and you have to just kind of endure it and stay pushing against that pain as hard as you can. In the marathon, it doesn't hurt that bad, in comparison to other races, but it hurts for a much longer period of time. It's sort of extended discomfort. And I think the ability to stay very focused for a very long time becomes important, and to be able to hold sort of that 98% focus, be able to let go enough that you don't run yourself into a wall, but to be able to just stay, because especially late in the race, if you lose focus for even 400 meters or so, your body won't let you get back on the pace. That's lost time now. There's just no way you're going to be able to re-accelerate. So you need to kind of stay on it. And I think that aspect of it it's learned, but it's also natural. I think you have a predilection towards being able to do it. I think anything can be learned, anything can be taught, but that particular area is something that came naturally to me.
Is that something in your workouts you can prepare your mind for?
I think it is, to a point, something you can prepare yourself in a workout for. Doing long runs does help it. And I think in a funny way, I remember doing a couple of long runs during the summer in college where I was actually running at a very slow pace, but the heat got to me and I ended up getting a little bit of heat stroke and just struggling in the last couple of miles. And so that even though I was only running maybe 7 minutes per mile, way slower than what I would run a marathon at now, it very much simulated the end of a marathon. It really feels like a battle against almost life or death. You feel like you're losing all control, and it's just like this need to finish. And I think that is a good practice for it. You can do things that are sort of like a dress rehearsal, but there isn't anything I've been able to find that is just like the show. You get moments where you're like, that's the feeling I'm going to have, but nothing quite to that point. And I think that's something about the marathon, because of the nature of how long it takes to recover from it. You can't really practice it in practice. You just spend all your time recovering. So there's that bit of unknown.
Do you, in your workouts, try to simulate Berlin in August?
Yeah, that's really the goal. The weather lately has sort of prevented getting ready for the heat in the right way, although they're saying it could be cooler in Berlin. It's at the end of August out there. It's sort of like the end of August here. It might be 95 degrees, but it might be 55 when we run if we get a rainy day or something. As the fall starts to approach, kind of get the up and downs. But in terms of the course, yeah, my focus has been very much on, all my workouts are on very, very flat places. In the past, preparing for marathons, I always try to simulate the course. So it's been hillier for the Olympic trials, hillier for New York City, that sort of thing. This course is flat, like tabletop flat, with one little footbridge that's a 5-foot climb and a 5-foot drop. And you do it 4 times, 4 loops. And that's it. That's literally the only hill. We got this preview from the USA Track and Field of the course, and they had all these pictures of this little footbridge. Like, the reason we got so many pictures is it's really the only hill, so everything has been either on a track or on a flat loop. I've been using the Boulevard in Lowell a little bit because it's just perfectly flat and well marked. And I think a lot of it is specifically getting ready for the challenge presented by individual marathons.
Within the race, do you create little races? Do you compete against other runners? Do you compete against the time? Are you competing against your own limits?
That's a terrific question, because I think that you do. You have to look at every race like you have a chance at winning. But, going to something like this, my personal best is 2 hours and 14 minutes, and it's on a hilly course. Okay, so I say, I think on that day I could have run 2:11 or 2:12. Well, Duncan McDonald and James Quamby are on the Kenyan team, and they both ran 2:04 this spring. That's 10 minutes fast. It's 2 miles ahead. And so you're forced to kind of look at the race and say, okay, what are my physical limitations? Like, what's the fastest way I can approach this course? And then hope that, to a point, those guys have to mess up a little bit. If they run as intelligently as I plan on running, in these conditions, they're not going to set a personal best, but they could run pretty close to it. I need to come in and run in a way that's going to give me a chance. So I have to hang back early and, try to run more evenly and just hope I've got enough to close and catch these guys. So I think you set up smaller races within the race, about hitting the pace early, maybe through the first 10 kilometers, and then look around. Who seems to be looking good in the group that I'm in? Then you get into just a race with them and just battle that person. And then, you see where your body is at halfway or at, 30 kilometers, and you say, okay, now it's time to fight. Now it's time to really go after people. And then it's a third race. And I do think that that's definitely an aspect of it.
Does the Olympics become the next goal?
Oh, the Olympics is absolutely the next goal. It's funny, I never really thought of it. As an adult, I didn't really think of the Olympics as a legitimate possibility. You start to get a sense of how difficult it is to really make a team and just how elite that is. But then with the Olympic trials and finishing 7th, missing by a few spots, you start to think, a couple of those guys are going to retire. A couple of those guys are going to be hurt the next time around, and yeah, some younger guys are going to come up, but this is tremendous practice for it. It's another chance to race without pace setters, which is similar to our trials, and a criterium course, which again is going to be similar to our trials. So I think that's definitely the next goal. And part of this is, I'm in a process of trying to figure out my body, figure out how to best approach things, and get over some lingering problems that I've had so that I can make a run at, making that Olympic team.
Good luck.
Thank you.